All right, welcome back to the Best Version of Me podcast, where we challenge you to be the best version of yourself. We have a special guest for our show today. Very excited. When we were thinking about creating this show, he came to mind, so we've been looking forward to getting him on our show. Very excited for him to tell his story, things that God is doing in his life, and what he has coming up. So remember, Best Version of Me is where we move, touch, and inspire you to be the best version of you. Our guest today is Pastor Sonny Arguinzoni Jr. He is a senior pastor of Victory Outreach Chino. He's an author, renowned speaker, elder, pastor, preacher, evangelist. I mean, God is just using him in a powerful, powerful way. He's just an anointed man of God, and he's also very special to me as well because he's our spiritual leader at the church. He's my friend, and I'm so grateful to have him on the show. Pastor Sonny Arguinzoni Jr., thank you so much for being on Best Version of Me.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.
Absolutely.
It's good to be with you in this type of setting.
Thank you.
I've seen you for years, coming to church and raising your family in the way of the Lord, and beautiful to see how your family's coming to Christ too.
Thank you, appreciate that. We're so excited to have you here on the show, Pastor. For those who don't know you, we want to kind of go a little bit of your background, your story, what God is doing now, and then what God is doing in the future. So maybe we can kind of go back to the beginnings of Pastor Sonny before ministry. I know that you were involved with sports, right? Maybe you can kind of share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was raised in church. Of course, the church was in East LA to begin with. When my parents just started in '67. I was born in '69, so I'm a little older now, but raised in East LA partly, half the week, and West Covina the other half.
Yes.
Lived with the men's home and women's home. People that were just getting off drugs lived at a big ranch, 7-acre ranch. Some of it's written in my book. We'll share that later. But a very unique, being raised up in a unique two sides of the fence kind of the world.
Explain that.
Okay, you got the suburb. At that time, West Covina was more middle class, some upper class and South Hills people.
Mm-hmm.
And so the kids at school would get dropped off in nice cars, like Cadillacs. One person gets dropped off with a limo.
Wow.
Nothing less than that. I mean, just nice cars, BMWs. I don't even know if BMWs were back then, but anyway. They were that, yeah. So all the nice cars, and they would take me in a church van that said Jesus on it.
All nice and painted and new rims?
No. It was. We weren't that quality yet.
There you go.
It was a used van. In fact, it had a sunroof, but it wasn't meant to be. It was a rusted out roof. It had a hole in it.
Wow, just to look up to the stars.
Yeah, and so sometimes they would take me, and and they start. Danny Lara used to take me. Danny Lara, if you don't know who he is, we'd call him Homeboy Sermon, but he would, tease me, and he would start talking Spanish out loud. And all of them were, white kids, and none of them even knew Spanish. And I looked like, oh, God, I had to run from the van because I wanted to get as far away as I can from that image. Because then I was starting to feel like, what side of the fence am I supposed to be on? At church and with all these different types of people, at my school, all these other types.
So how did you deal with that, like emotionally and psychologically? Because we don't really get to hear about those things too much. What was taking place internally?
What was taking place, because most of my friends, they didn't know they knew of Catholic, they were Catholic kids. And I never knew anybody in my school at that time that knew Pentecost or Pentecostal type of church. And our church was really Pentecostal, singing and dancing, the Spirit, filled with the Holy Spirit. And so my friends, it was foreign to them. So I was trying to find my own identity. And I didn't really share the gospel because I didn't have my own personal relationship with the Lord yet. But I remember that I know that God is real. I knew that for sure. But I didn't know how it fit into my environment then. Mm-hmm. Another thing I felt kind of awkward too, at that time we didn't have the nicest clothes. We would get donations, and different organizations would donate clothes for our family. And so instead of having Nike, the swoosh like that, I had the upside down swoosh.
Yeah,
imitation.
Knockoff?
Yeah, knockoff. Yeah. Instead of having the alligator, what was it called? The Izod.
Izod. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I had a dragon.
Oh. Yeah, I remember I used to get my shoes at Kmart, and it would be the XJ900s. That was like the Nike version, but it was like $10, $15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So everything was, pretty much hand-me-downs. and my friends had all the nice stuff. And so finally, as I got a little older, my mom started investing and getting me nicer clothes. Yeah.
And in school, you were in sports, baseball,
Yeah.
right?
So I started baseball at 5 years old, in a small little league there in West Covina, right by Edgewood High School. And I played third base. I had a great arm. Right away, I knew I loved baseball because I used to see my sister Debbie used to play softball, fast pitch.
Okay.
So I admired her because she was really good. And so as a kid, I would always play at the Hacienda, the 7-acre place. We had a big area to play ball. Every day I'd get that ball. Every day I'd get that glove, the bat, practice. Couldn't wait to be a part of a team. 5 years old, made the All-Stars, fell in love with it.
Wow.
Got my first trophy that year. And every single year after that, played. As I got into my teen years, still played. My parents would go on vacations every summer with the family. I would miss them because I loved baseball that much. My passion for baseball was everything. I had a dream that I'm going to be a major leaguer someday. It was and I had the tools. I was developing, I was getting better and better. So yeah, that was a main part of my life.
What were some principles that you learned being a part of a team in sports, the coaching and the atmosphere and the camaraderie and the competitiveness? What were some things that you got from that?
Well, there's different teams, different coaches. Some coaches favor their own children over the rest of the team. I don't like that. I don't like favoritism. And I was a part of a team one time. I'm going to give you some negatives first.
Yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
I was a part of a bad team, 13 years old, pony baseball. And the coach was favoring his son for shortstop. His son was horrible. I mean, he couldn't hit. He didn't throw that well. He couldn't field that well. And I just remember being on the bench on a losing team thinking, I belong on that field every inning of every game because I knew my ability, but the coach didn't recognize it. And so I remember his son going into the dugout one day after one of the innings, and I was so frustrated. I said, what do you want to do in life? I asked him. He goes, I don't know yet. I'm thinking about this or that. And I go, so you don't want to be a baseball player? He goes, no. I go, well, that's what I want to do. So tell your dad to put me in the game.
Were you short? Were you also playing shortstop at that time?
I was playing
too,
everything.
Or everywhere?
Yeah.
Just put me in the game.
Just put me anywhere.
Yeah.
But I mostly infield, very rarely outfield. And then I started developing. Pitching was one of my strengths. Catching was I was good at that too. So I made all-stars for those types of positions. And I hit pretty well too. But mainly my main thing was pitching toward the end of my little career. Yeah.
And what were some positives?
Some positives, okay.
Yeah.
When you have a winning mentality of a coach, it sets the atmosphere for the rest of the team players. When you have a coach that's interested in every player and knows where their power spots are and knows how to talk to them individually as well as collectively, it creates an atmosphere and a chemistry with the whole team, and it creates a camaraderie where you're able to cheer on your teammate rather than compete against them. You encourage your teammate. They encourage you back. Another thing I learned, and I've always been this way, where if you're down by 6 runs, 7 runs, we don't give up to the last out. That's always been me. I would be in the dugout, the guys would be down, we're losing. I said, we don't stop to the last out, guys. Get up, let's cheer on our
teammates.
Don't give up, So I also learned how to go through the pain of loss. Remember, I made All-Stars back at Orangewood Park. 16 years old, I think. I'm 15 and 16, but I think it was my 16-year-old year, my last year in Colt baseball. I came in it was the first game of the All-Star game against Baldwin Park, and a guy by the name of Randy Knorr, he ended up making the major leagues down the road. He was a tall guy, huge guy. We didn't know he was a future major leaguer, but I get up in the last inning to close the game out.
And you're pitching.
I'm pitching to be the closer. The guy before me did a decent job. It was 5-3, but I came in with 2 guys on.
So were you guys down or up?
We were down. Well, we were up 5-3.
Okay,
but 2 guys on. This guy Randy Knorr comes up. I inherited those 2 guys on base. Last inning, I got to just get this guy out, Randy Knorr. That was it, And so I threw him sliders and another slider. He swung, he missed. Then I threw one way outside, but he was so tall, he reached out, and there was a short fence. I don't know if you remember that field.
Yeah.
Had a net.
Yeah.
But he was so big, he was able to just knock like a fly ball.
Just enough.
In a normal field, it would have been caught. but it went right over the net, and we lost the game on a walk-off. And I was so discouraged. I was so upset. I felt like, man, I thought I could dominate anyone. So the next day I go to the practice. It was hard for me to show up because I felt like I messed it up. It was a 2-game elimination contest.
Was that the first
tournament.
loss?
It was the first game.
Oh,
So we lost the first day. It felt discouraging. I felt I'm the guy that messed it up. So I had to pull myself up from my cleats, get back in there with the team. And I said, I'm not going to lose again this week. So we won the next game. Then the next game I started. We won 2-1. Then we won the next game, and then we entered into the championship against Baldwin Park. And so that first game, I closed that one out. And then I pitched the full game for the doubleheader because we had to beat them twice. And then I struck out Randy North 3 times.
Did you?
And we beat them. We won the championship.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a good feeling that you never give up when you're down. So you had a bad day, but there's better ones coming. And that plays into life too.
Yeah, there's a lot of leadership that you just demonstrated there, determination, focus. You took ownership
Yes.
of it. Some people may say, well, it wasn't your fault, but you knew your part in the team. You took it, but then you came, rather than just saying, okay, I'm going to give up, what do I need to do to change to be the best version of me?
Yes.
To be able to continue on and win and take it home?
You got to learn from your losses. So I learned when not to pitch Randy North. And I knew next time I face him, I'm going to get him out. Because I don't like to be somebody that succumbs to challenges. If there's a giant in my way, I still got the power to overcome that giant. And for me, the power now is in Christ. Then it was the power of my arm, power of my mind. I had a mentality that I could beat anyone that comes against me on that, any batter that comes. I'll blow them back, I'll throw them a curve, they'll reach out and miss it. I had that much confidence. Not arrogance, but confidence. There's a difference. When you're arrogant, you're like, people don't want to be around that. When you're confident in what your ability is, and you know you have a great team around you, you're able to be a complement to the team and a resource to go to when it gets rough in the game.
Where did that come from, that competitiveness and that confidence?
I think a lot of it came from the desire to make it someday. I know I got to have these qualities in me. Also, I believe I'm raised under a man full of vision, who's still full of vision, even more so. That he would even get on me. One time I was pitching in Little League, and he pulled me aside because I was showing my anger out there. I was showing my frustration, my emotion. And then after I got the guy out, whatever happened, he met me at the side by the fence. He says, "Get over here." He says, "You don't ever show your emotion out there. You don't ever," so I was throwing my glove. I was like, acting like a little baby. And then I learned something there. He says, "So don't show your emotion under pressure. Don't let the emotions get the best of you. You got to be focused." And so a lot of it came from my father too. And
What
then
year was
my
this?
mom's very competitive too. She's that type where I was bred under leaders that were strong.
What year was this at, more or less?
For that one,
Yes.
that was the Cortez Park Little League.
Wow.
I was about maybe 10 or 11.
And when you were in high school towards the end, you mentioned your dad. He's the founder of Victory Outreach International.
Right.
How was the ministry as a whole during that time, and how was it being the founder's son, not in church, in baseball?
Yeah.
What were some things taking place internally?
Well, a lot of it, I had to go to church for one, at least twice a week. That was the rule of the house. So as a teenager, I tried to get out of it because baseball, and it worked most of the time. And I ended up getting a car at 16, so I'm able to travel on my own and do my own thing. So toward those middle, teen years, I started experimenting with party life. I started doing things that I was trained not to do, being raised in a Christian home. The funny thing is that I'd hear testimonies in the early days of Victory Outreach of, I used to be this, I used to be that, and alcoholic, drug addict, whatever. And they said it was fun for a season, but then the fun ran out. And then finally I hit rock bottom, came to Christ. What rang out to me at times, what was fun?
The curiosity-ness
Curiosity. And my friends, rubbed off on me a bit, my peers at school. And I wasn't a follower, but I was more like, I want to taste and see how that feels, that fun of the sin. It's pleasurable for a season, the Bible says, but I wanted to have my little season. I knew eventually I'm gonna follow Jesus because I've been raised that way. But let me check out how it feels to drink something. Let me see how it feels. I didn't really smoke a lot because I didn't want to get my lungs messed up, but I did try. And when my parents would go out of town, the Arguinzoni teenagers got crazy.
That was the place to be.
Yeah, we would do all-nighters, man. We were not good PKs.
And you were close to your high school, right, where your home was at?
Yeah.
Not too far from there?
That's right. Yeah, so my brother, he took it another notch. I don't want to get too deep into that, but he would have at the house.
Took it to the next level?
I would be careful about that, you know. But yeah, so all of us had our time in the season in the world, all 5 of us, my siblings. I have 2 older sisters, a younger brother and a younger sister, who all got saved down the road in their teenage years, some of them a little bit later. But now all of us are in ministry, helping my father and my mom. And we have some of the largest churches in San Jose. My brother Tim, Pastor Al and Georgina, they're in San Diego. And Doreen and Joe and Whittier. That's my sister Doreen and me, the Mother Church. We have a strong ministry.
So going back to not coming from a certain lifestyle, but then hearing a testimony of how at once it was fun, but then rock bottom and then God saved. Is that some kind of a double-edged sword from somebody who has an experience, who kind of gets curious, hearing the testimony, right? What does that do to somebody who hasn't experienced that? Because that's powerful what you just brought up.
Part of the problem was this, okay? We didn't have a great youth ministry back then. They didn't relate to us. It was more, I'll just be plain and simple.
Please.
Cholos, ex-gang members, ex-prisoners, ex-everything, everything you think of.
Hardcore inner city.
Yeah, and then like I said, I grew up in the suburbs where everything was not like that, so then they would try to teach us in children's chapel. We would just be bored. And then after our teenage years, they didn't really have a strong youth ministry. So there was something missing for people that are even PKs like us. We were the first PKs of the movement. So yeah.
And what does PK mean for those who don't know?
Preacher's kid, or pastor's kid. So we were just trying to find our own identity, I guess, and we tried things out. And the fun didn't last. After high school, at 19 years old, I started feeling the emptiness. I started feeling like, hey, if I die now, I'm going to go to hell, And I was getting close to, doing too many things that could probably get me in a place where I could lose my life. And so it happened. I finally gave my life to the Lord on a Sunday morning at 19 years old. Over 1,000 people at the church at that time. And then I made the altar call. And I always said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it for life. I'm not going to be one of those guys that go in and out, but I'm going to go all the way. So from that point on, I started following Christ. But the thing is this, though, too. When it comes to serving God, it takes determination. Just like we talked about baseball. Mm-hmm. It takes determination to stay in there, even when you get hit, even when you feel like quitting, even though you feel like this is not worth it, because you're going to get attacked. You're going to get problems. But shortly thereafter, I told you about I was feeling death around the corner. Only a month, I think, after I got saved, my friends who were jocks, I had different sets of friends. These are friends that were partiers, but jocks too. They were football guys, big guys. They were at In-N-Out on Grand Avenue. I don't know if you've ever been to that.
Oh, yeah. That was the spot right after.
Used to be a hangout.
Right after the games.
Or after the parties.
Yeah, that was the spot.
If they broke up a party, that would be the place to go to find out where's the next after party.
Yeah, Grand, and then the other one was right off of Barinka.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was not hanging with them now because I was saved, finding my footing in Christ. Then I get a phone call that there was a big fight at In-N-Out and that my friends were involved in it, okay? Then they go down Grand and they ended up seeing those guys. They were from another neighborhood, which my friends weren't from the gang background. We didn't have a lot of gangs at that time that I knew of.
What year was this?
In West Covina. That was 88.
Okay.
1988. So these guys were from that realm, from that type of group. I think it was from Azusa, from somewhere out there. So they stopped at a red light and they started, going at it again, talking. They got out of the car, both sets, started fighting. Our guys were fighting with fists. These guys had knives. Started stabbing. So one of my friends, his name was Joel, he got stabbed. Just a quarter more of an inch, he would have punctured his heart. It didn't go deep enough. The other one, his name was Carl. He got stabbed in the back a couple times. Lost 4 pints of blood. You know, 6 pints, you're done, right? 5, I think 6 pints is what we have. Something like that. And so I went to visit them in the hospital with the message of love and hope that I found in Jesus Christ. But then I thought, if I was with these guys, I probably would have been the one killed, because I knew better. And God was already pricking my heart. He was touching me. So you need to get saved now. You don't have, tomorrow's not promised. These guys didn't know the answer like I did.
So was it the fear of death that kind of nudged you towards?
Okay, that plus my dream for baseball, I wasn't sure if I was going to make it without some help from heaven. I needed God. So those two things, but a lot of feeling of sense of purpose and not sure if I'm going to really make it or not. I was starting to doubt myself, and I kind of felt alone in the process. And I felt like, and then I started seeing how God was raising up some other young people in the church. I remember hearing one of the pastors, one of the young youth leaders, when I was 16, I think it was, and he was horrible. I mean, he would yell the whole time. You hit the pulpit or the thing that held the mic, knock down plants.
Mic stand. Very dramatic.
Very dramatic. It was one of our first youth conferences before I got saved, and I was like, I could do better than that.
He's kicking off his shoe.
And I thought, someday, if I ever get saved, I'm going to try to see if I can do better than that.
Wow.
So, anyway.
So now that you got saved, how did your friends feel towards that? And how did you feel? Did you have to be one way around one set? And when you're on the church, did you have to be another way? Because now you really are on both sides, but something internally changed.
I had to let go of my friends.
Okay.
I had to except for the baseball guys that I played with. I ended up going to Pasadena City College, but I didn't hang out with them after the games or after the practices like I used to. I ended up going to church more. So I found myself wanting to be at church more than to be on the field. My desires began to shift.
And did you have leadership or camaraderie within the church that you had other people that you can now replace that group? Because that's also important too, because you have to be able to replace something with something. If not, you have a gap, right?
Yeah, we started seeing some of my church friends get saved too. And so I had more time with them. So we were young, and on Friday nights we'd go to the church. We'd have Friday night prayer night, and then we'd go to the basketball court, play till 3 or 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning sometimes. I wasn't good at basketball. That was the least of my sports that I was good at. But just the camaraderie, the fun, exercise, and all that stuff we would do. Then we joined the softball team for the church, and it was slow pitch. I'd rather have fast pitch, hardball, but that's what we had, at that time. And we dominated. We won. We were undefeated 3 years in a row. It was called the Treasures.
The Treasures.
Yeah, we play at Whittier Narrows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you play other churches or just other leagues?
It was a Christian organization.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it was mostly all churches. And then some of our guys would cuss, though, sometimes. They were going through the process.
Still going through the process, yeah. They were still in the oven.
They go, shit, the SH, whatever.
Yeah.
And then the umpire said, "You're out of here."
Oh, they would call him out for that?
Yeah, because it was
a Christian organization.
Christian organization. You pray before, you pray after. One of our guys from Victory Outreach was cussing.
Here come the Victory Outreach guys. So now that you're saved, right, how do you get to now becoming the pastor of Victory Outreach there in La Puente? What led up to that?
That's a long process. But
short version.
Well, okay, so I became a youth pastor first.
Okay.
And I was good in that. First an evangelist. I became an evangelist.
Did you feel called to be an evangelist at that time?
Yeah. When I separated myself, some of that's in the book too. It tells my story, my calling, and the process I went through. When I felt called of God to be an evangelist or a preacher, I decided to go to Bible college and stay involved in church at the same time. So my dad appointed me over the youth ministry, international, then eventually took over the local youth. And at first I wasn't, kind of hitting brick walls, you know, not really connecting. I tried to dress different to match the culture of inner city.
Meaning like when you're preaching to the audience?
Yeah, I
or
try
to the church?
I try to relate to the young people. Most of them, like I said, were gang members or sons of gang members, you know what I mean? Or ex-drug addict kids, or come from broken homes. Just, they dress different. I dress more with like Levi's, and, you know, like a jock type of look.
Mm-hmm.
And they would come with their beanies at the time, or
Yeah, the shorts and
Or,
catching
yeah.
the socks. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Three-step.
I didn't go that far, but I did try the beanie thing at one time. I tried like the Pendleton looking, you know, shirts.
Button to the top.
It just didn't work for me, and people kind of laughed at me because I was over trying.
But your heart was in the right place.
It was in the right place.
Right.
And then I had a realization that you don't have to be like them physically or outwardly. You just got to have the heart of Jesus for them. And that's why I had a revelation. And I started just being myself. And being myself was my best version of myself.
That's good.
See how I did that?
I like that. Nice plug-in. Nice plug-in. Nice plug-in. So now that...
So that after that, then we did good. My dad elevated our team, most of our team, to adult ministry. I ended up leaving the youth ministry to my brother called the Gang, God's Anointed Now Generation, and it just continued to grow. So now I'm the assistant or associate pastor of the mother church. My dad started traveling a lot more. Basically, he came back one day from a trip and he had a meeting with the leaders. He says, you know what, I'm traveling a lot. I'm the founder of this ministry, but I can't be the senior pastor anymore. My son's taking it over. He never had a meeting prior to that.
So you didn't even know that?
He threw me in the deep.
Wow.
Yeah. So at 29 years old.
He saw something in you, obviously.
Yeah, he saw something
right.
in me.
He wasn't just going to be putting somebody out there that wasn't just because you're his son.
Yeah.
Going back to the coach
Yeah.
and the shortstop, right? He
Right.
believed in you. You also had a passion. You were already doing it,
Yeah.
right?
I already did TV programs. I was starting to really develop. But I wasn't even married yet. I was dating. That's my wife now, but we were getting closer to getting more committed. Wasn't engaged to her yet. So this is August of 1998. I remember it vividly. I remember the sun shining in. I remember my dad just throwing it out there. And I remember the faces of the people when they saw me. They go, oh, like they were shocked. Some of them were probably like, no, don't leave us.
And that's challenging for a congregation, for you, right? I'm sure maybe even for your dad, but also the congregation as well. Whenever the mantle gets passed down from somebody that they grew up underneath,
that's true.
It's a challenge,
so
right?
I'm the little brother taking over this big church, and that's their spiritual father. So I fathered the young people, but my dad challenged me. He says, don't speak like a youth pastor. You know, you're an adult pastor. So he said, let that go and be a little bit more general with your messages, your preaching. You know, give vision and all that, but don't be exclusively to the young people. Mm-hmm. Which I feel like I did it, but I felt regret later because they were more pliable. They're empty vessels. Mm-hmm. They would listen to me. The first time I would tell them, they would do it. The older ones, there were old wineskins and trying to put new wine in them, some of them. And it was hard. It was a hard transition. And then after I got married that next year, then, you know, just the first couple of years was kind of a honeymoon because I implemented new things. I had all these great ideas. But then after a couple of years, when my dad left to San Diego with my mom, reality kicked into the church because they were still attending. When they left to go help a church that was hurting, and they left to go pastor it, they took some of our good leaders to help them, and then I started feeling the void, and then people started feeling the void. Did
it really feel like real at that time? Like, wow, you know, because you said your mom and your dad are still in the church.
Yeah, so I felt the support. The support system was there. And so after they left, it felt like now they don't feel security. The oldies, now they're oldies, but at that time that was the congregation that...
The first generation.
The first generation that my dad raised. And so my mom and dad, they're such powerful leaders. Mm-hmm. And so when they moved on, then people would start complaining, you know, over small things. and how to deal with it. And some of them are still with us today. I can name names. But I've forgiven them over the years, even though it was hurtful at times, some of the stuff they would do. But they stuck it out, and I stuck it out.
And then you got married, right?
Got married to a wonderful wife. I had other opportunities in my 20s, but I said, I'm going to wait for the right one. Thank God I did. I don't want to say things that I shouldn't, but.
Well, your wife's amazing.
I dated prominent girls that I was introduced to by Tim Story.
We got to get him on the show.
Yeah, you got to get Tim on. And one of them was
ask him those
one of them was a Raiderette.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So, but I felt like she won't fit in. When she came to see our church and sit in the audience, and I could just tell she's not going to fit here at that time. And then I felt like I got to marry somebody that is going to stick it out through thick and thin. I felt like she was looking more for like the spotlight. Mm-hmm. Later, little did I know that after I kind of broke off with her, she started going out for another guy that was a bishop.
Oh.
And he ended up divorcing his wife for her. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
So I could have been with a woman that wouldn't last. So I hope I'm talking to some men out there.
I know they're listening. I know it's hitting home.
I'm putting it out there. But I said no.
Because that can happen. I mean, let's be real, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things out there. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then what happens is you let the enemy come in and say, well, this one looks better than what I presently have. Mm-hmm. But it's also a shame on ministry. It shames it's stinky for the kingdom. It's not good. And people from the outside that look in, they say, how could you divorce one woman and marry another one soon right after that? And so I'm just saying this, I don't even know why I said it. But
somebody needs to hear it.
Exactly. And then waiting for the right person. It's not about just the look, which I have a wonderful looking wife, okay? But it's about the heart.
That's right.
You're looking at the character. And she wasn't looking for me. She was looking for Jesus. And so I became a distraction to her. Mm. So eventually I won her over.
You guys got married?
Got married.
Right.
Then we were going to wait on having kids, but 4 months in, she gets pregnant. And that's where Cruz came in, my first son.
Well, they say when you tell God what you got planned, and then, you know.
We didn't have Planned Parenthood. It was God planned.
God planned, that's right.
Yeah.
So now you're married.
And now it's expensive to take care of.
Because you have 5 beautiful children, which we'll get into. So now you're married, right? You and your wife, you're overseeing the church there in La Puente, right?
Yeah.
And then years later, the ministry is growing. You know, God is doing great things, right? You're finding your power spot. Mm-hmm. All these great things are taking place, and then all of a sudden, God speaks to you on different things that took place to move from La Puente over here to Chino.
Yeah. Well, what happened? We had built a building there, a prefab building, and beautified it. It was a beautiful place. We started having conferences there, Mighty Men of Valor, women's conventions,
carnivals, plays, all that, right?
Everything. Youth events. A lot of activity, rallies. We had, then we had one of our last event was Blood In, Blood Out with Art Blahos, ex-Mafia hitman, and it was so packed that the neighbors started like really not liking us. I mean, they already not liking the activity that we had. It was a residential neighborhood, and they started looking into about our building, and they found out that we didn't have a CUP, which is a conditional use permit for that new building. Mm. So they complained to the officials, and then we ended up getting called into court. We brought a lot of our congregation to stand for us, and so they put a restriction on us that we can only have, I think, 2 days a week of church. We could have from this time to this time, I think till 10 p.m., and then we got to get out of there. And so that would last for years, for several years, or I think 4 or 5 years that would be restricted. So that would X out all the crusades we do, all the special events, all the conferences.
The heart of
all the
ministry.
Stuff, yeah, for the mother church to give that up, then we cease to be what we're supposed to be, the hub or the base for the movement. So I had talks with my parents, talked to our leaders, he said, if we stay here, we're not going to be able to do what we're supposed to do. And then we could sell and move to another place, a better area, commercial area. So we took a step of faith, got the land that we're in now. It used to be a sheep field. It was, you know, it was just all dirt and one house. And so we sold our land, we moved, and then we started our journey. What's supposed to take a year and a half to get in took longer because in 2007 we had a economy crash in America.
Yep.
And everybody was set back on building projects and everything. So that was another story, a trial. But we made it through.
How long was that journey from?
That was about 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah. So we ended up getting in here 2012.
10 years ago, right?
Yeah, 10 years ago now.
Yeah, celebrate
We're
10
celebrating 10 years in this building.
Wow.
Yeah. There's still more to do here.
I know you learned a lot of things during that journey, but what's like one or two things that just really sticks out right now, the things that you learned, what God did in your heart during that time of really trusting him and not seeing what you wanted to have happen on the timing that you wanted to see it, but God's timing?
I think I grew in perseverance, persevering and persisting through it. And then once again, getting re-promised by God. 2.5 years into it, me and my wife we just felt so stuck and we felt so alone. We felt like quitting. It's like, you know, what are we going to do? We brought these people into the wilderness, now we're stuck. So we're on the floor, literally face on the floor of my office, not this office, but my home office, crying out to God. And I'm feeling the emotion right now because it's real. And then we get a word. And then during that time, my dad calls and he says, "What did you do?" It didn't help at the time. I felt like discouraging. Like I really, I felt hopeless at the time. But then God re-promised us it's going to happen. And then it happened. Not right away, but it took about 2.5 years more. But I stopped feeling discouraged. I started preaching with more faith because God re-promised that it will be done. And then 2012, we entered in. So, yeah, perseverance. At your lowest, you got to get up and trust that God's going to be with you. And then the people, the remnant that stayed with us, it made me love them that much more because they endured with me. They endured with us, They didn't stop believing. So, and then also I grew faith muscles through it. And then at the same time, I also had more of an ownership because we had to literally build this building from the ground up. The other one, a lot of it was my dad that did it. I kind of like re-pioneered by leaving there and moving 17 miles away from La Puente. Mm-hmm. So that was a challenge too.
Yeah, because that's a big deal. 17, 18 miles east.
Yeah.
Most people who are going to the church didn't live over here. They lived on that side.
Yeah.
So everybody had to now come further out. And back in the day, from La Puente to Chino felt like forever. I remember growing up in La Puente, West Covina. I had family who lived out here. And when we'd come on Friday, we'd bring our pillows and blankets because we weren't going to drive back the same night. It was too far.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
we'd go come out here for the whole weekend. So
yeah, so a lot of them went on the journey, but some chose to go to another Victory Outreach. And that was okay. But then some, when they saw that it wasn't happening, then they started jumping ship too. But the ones that stuck it out, they are grateful that they did now,
Well, I'm glad they did, and I'm glad you made the choice to do that and stick with it because my wife and I came in on that journey. I went there a few times in La Puente for like the Cry of the Young and Blood and Blood Out and all those, but it wasn't until I was going to another ministry, and then when we came over here, I came on the journey. So doing the setup, first at the Fairplex and then at the high school, back and forth. So,
And I appreciate your faithfulness through the years. I remember when you first made the transition, one of the first things you told me is that you don't feel the family over there, the other place.
Good memory.
Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that vividly.
And that was the thing for you. That was the thing that hooked you, is that you felt family here. Because it's our theme, a place you call home, a people you call family. That's our Victory Outreach slogan at the Mother Church. And I'm happy you found the family that you're looking for.
Absolutely.
And you never deserted it. So
this is my church for life. You
And
know.
see your son rising up. He's 19 now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we got baptized at the Ontario High School. Well, we baptized, me and my wife, raised up our son, our 3 daughters. All they know is our church here, and this is, you know, I already have visions of them being a part and being raised up. So this is
Awesome.
where we're at. You know, we got some deep roots, and you know, all we're here is to build and grow.
And part of my vision for the beginning of starting the gang, God's Anointed Now generation, was for intervention and prevention. That young people could be raised and not having to go to the world and try tasting of the world like I did, but having a place for them that they feel a sense of belonging. And a lot of them came up not having to do that. My kids have come up not having to do what I did to go to the world so far. Jordan had his little struggle, but he came through.
And that's key, because I also came from that background, and I remember going to a church or two, and I just felt like out of place, you know, from the party scene, because that's where I came from, the nightclubs.
Right.
You know, I remember even being too young going to Red Onion or the Safari Bar. Like, I was a youngster, but all my buddies who actually threw the clubs were friends of mine. So I started off at an early age being exposed to a lot of, you know, older things.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So I started young too. So, yeah.
You know, no regrets, because I learned a lot of different things over the way, and God brought me to where I'm at today. And I am who I am today based off of the things I had to go through.
Right. You
And
learn
those are
from it.
preparations.
Yeah, you learn from that stuff.
We learn from that stuff. So now we're here at the Mother Church, Chino. What are some things that God is doing in your life now? And then we'll get into your book.
God is doing a lot of new things. Personally, I feel like, you know, because my oldest son's 22 now, Cruz, but I'm blessed by him getting saved at 15. And he's a great musician. He sang today. He led that whole team. My son Jordan, he's getting ready to leave to Amsterdam, UTC, our urban training center. That's where that's where God got a hold of my life.
And you talk about that in the book.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's where I separated myself. And it's like he's following in my footsteps, but now it's more organized over there. And then I have my daughter Brooklyn, 18 years old, and she just sang her first solo today.
Wow.
In front of all these people, which she used to be super shy. She plays guitar, she loves the Lord, and she is a pure girl, and I love that. My sisters were partiers at her age. she hasn't touched any of that. So I always say, God, just give me one girl. I don't want, like my sisters, I don't want 3 sisters.
Yeah, we got.
And I want to make sure she's protected. So he gave me
Surround
2.
them with
I was thinking 1 boy, 1 girl, 1 boy, but God gave me 2 boys, 1 girl, and then 2 boys. So she's surrounded.
She's around, yeah.
Yeah. So
She's sandwiched
protected.
in.
Yeah. And then I got my son Tyler, who's started football at the same high school I went to, South Hills. He's growing up to be a good-looking kid. And then Cody loves baseball. I'm praying that he's my guy that would do what I was meant to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Supposedly meant to do. But anyway, so that's family. When it comes to church, we just want to continue to grow. That pandemic, everybody shrunk. Every church, every organization that has public ministry. But we grew in our virtual family. We grew it with, you know, we had good cameras. We were able to do good tapings. So that grew. But now that it's starting to dissipate, this pandemic, we want to keep building, getting people in the church, going back to double services. My goal is either by the fall or the new year to reopen our double services. So that's part of my goal. I want to see these young people that are coming up, the teenagers and the young adults, really invest in them. That's why we had them over my house yesterday for a luau type of fellowship pool party, and really put my imprint on them, me and my wife, touching them, because they are now in our future. We're believing for a 3rd wave of revival, and we're starting to see it happen.
Wow.
So that's for the church. And then for the movement, to do whatever I can to help my father expand to new nations and different places around the world. However I could assist him as an elder in the ministry, I feel that's one of my main priorities is to do that, besides being local. I'm not a local leader, I'm a global leader.
That's right. Now, you brought up earlier a little plug-in for the podcast name, Best Version of Me. But when you hear Best Version of Me, what does that mean to you? What comes to mind? What's the definition on your end, Best Version of Me?
The best version of me is knowing God first. I have this saying, know, be, and do, in that order. Know him, become more like him, do his works. If you get it reversed and you start doing, you will be burned out. and you're going to be doing it at a mechanical way. You're not going to be doing it the way God intended for you to do it, with the right motives, with the right spirit. So when you know Christ, you know the heart of God, you know his will, then you become more like him in character. Character is so important. They say that your calling may get you there, but your character will keep you there. With great calling, with a big call, you have big character. And so being, developing the fruit of the Spirit and all that. And then the doing, knowing your gifts, knowing your passion, knowing your, honing in on your power spot, your giftings, and using them to the fullest extent, and getting better at it. And not just staying back in the early 2000s mentality, but growing with the ministry, evolving, growing your mentality, have an omega mentality. If you have a small mentality, you're going to have a small ministry. Or if you have a small mentality in the business world, you're going to have a small business. It's really up to you. Do you want to stay small or you want to expand? And that comes with really developing your giftings, your talents, your abilities. But remember that if God's for you, who could be against you? You know?
Amen. And somebody being the best version of themselves, is that a destination? Is it a journey? Or is it both?
It is. It's both. It is. I'm not the same guy I was 10 years ago. I'm not the same guy for sure 20 years ago. And then you also learn to be a better dad, a better husband, if you're working on these things, you know. How could you preach to people about having a, good marriage if your marriage is horrible? You know what I mean? So we've had to go through some things, but we always worked it out. She used to think divorce was a word that you could throw around when we first got married. I said, not in this house, because she grew up with divorced parents. Her aunts divorced, almost all of her family. I said, but we're not going to use that term here. We're sticking it out. So the best version of me, being a better man of God, being a better husband, being a better father, being a better pastor, being a better world leader, for the glory and honor of God, not for my glory, but for his glory.
And that's awesome, because you can be, like you said, you can be a good father, right? But not a good husband. You can be a good leader, but not a good follower, right?
Right.
Being the best version is all versions, right?
Yes.
All areas within
All
that version,
areas.
right?
And
Mind, financial.
Yeah. Body, soul, mind, and spirit. And also, there's a lot of areas I could work on, and I'm sure everyone needs to identify that. And or else what you find out, people start noticing it, the areas that you're not strong in, and then they'll start maybe have a less of respect for you because you're not working on certain things. So credibility is a big piece of ministry, respect. And having credibility, like even building this building and raising all the money out of raise and all that stuff, even raising money for our new things now, they see the results. So they believe every time I offer an offering, I don't have to panic or worry about it, because they see everything we say we're going to do, we do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's right.
We have a history. We raise money for this, we raise money for that, boom, it's done. And so credibility is very important in any aspect of life.
Absolutely. And even awareness, right? Because we can't change, fix, reinvent, recreate unless we're aware that we need to do that in the first place,
Yeah.
right?
And there's always going to be a blind spot. You got to have a wife that says it like it is. Somebody close to you, your inner circle that can talk to you direct. You know what I mean? And say, bro, you're slacking on this area. I noticed it. Because sometimes we don't see it ourselves.
Yeah.
But if you have a leader that sees it, or a peer that loves you, somebody who's a friend, But as you rise higher, sometimes you have fewer friends.
Which is not always a bad thing.
It's not always a bad thing.
Right.
No. I had to release certain friends at certain levels because they went another direction or whatever. But you got to have God as your best friend, and you got to have a leader that cares and loves you, that you can go to when you need him.
Absolutely.
And then people around you too. Maybe just a small circle.
Yeah. And I'm all about both, but I'd rather have 3 or 5 solid people that got my back, that if I go to war, they're right next to me, than 50 of them that when something happens, everybody runs. You look around, and it's just you.
Yeah, you're
right.
Right.
So give me 3 or 5, and we can conquer the world.
That's right.
So let's talk about your book.
Okay.
First off, what was the inspiration to write Descendants?
I've been having this inspiration since about maybe 10 years ago. I've always known I wanted to write a book. Okay.
For how long?
Well, since I took on the gang, God's Anointed Now Generation, I thought it was going to be called Gang, God's Anointed Now Generation. But then as time went on, I started preaching about God's going to do a new thing, third wave of the Holy Spirit. We have the first generation, pioneers, the second generation, what we call the Joshua generation, which is my generation. And now a third generation, which I prophesied, a third wave of revival is coming to this third generation, which includes our children. And so my dad latched onto that phrase, and he says, let's go with that. I believe that's a word from God. And so that was something stirring in this generation. But so it evolved into descendants, because that's part of our promise, Isaiah 54. It says, and your descendants shall inherit the nations and make the desolate cities inhabited. And I put in quotation the S because I'm a descendant, but then there's descendants that came, that I was around, and also the ones that came out of my ministry.
How long did it take you to write this?
Well, the pandemic helped a bit.
Gave you some isolated time to be able to focus on it?
It helped a bit. We were going a couple directions. I was, my wife, I would bounce things off her. Then we started developing an outline and sections of the book. And then we started writing. She was my typist. I was the ones that I just verbalized what I want. And it took about a year and a half, because then we set a deadline that by World Conference we got to get this out, because if we don't do it now, it may be irrelevant later. Maybe dated. But really, history is always important, because we got to know that our history, it makes us stronger for our now and for our future.
That's right.
So part of it's some history in there, but it's not just for Victory Outreach. I believe you can be inspired to that God can use the unlikely people to do incredible things. So it talks a little bit about my testimony, a little bit about the work God used me to do, the ups and downs, and what's cool about this book, God gave me an idea. I never seen it done before, but it may have been done, but to put QR codes in there with video.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I seen that.
And so people like Tim Story said, hey, he asked my publisher, he said, how come I didn't know about that? He goes, I didn't know either, he told me. And he had written a book too. And so then,
I've never seen that before.
Even Nicky Cruz, he's like, man, I didn't know they could do that. My dad was impressed. So innovation is something that God has blessed me with, to do things that have never been done before. I've been prophesied that by Dick Mills in Ontario High School when we're on the journey. I don't know if you were there for that.
Yeah.
He says, new things.
That's right.
Never been done before. Novel. He was given the definitions. At that time I was thinking, the new building. But I didn't realize it was other things to come. And there's still new things on the horizon.
And you mentioned about having the conference as a goal, right?
Yes.
They say a goal without a date is just a dream.
Exactly. And then I heard from my publisher too, he said out of 89% of people that desire to write a book, only 1% end up doing it and end up publishing it.
Yeah.
So I'm a 1%er, and so are you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, because most people...
It's a dream, but they never do it.
Or they started, but they never finish it.
Yeah.
Right? They get distracted. Maybe it wasn't as important as
there was
maybe they thought
moments
it
we
was.
wanted to quit because we're so busy in ministry and family, traveling, but then we stuck with it. And then toward the end, we're like on the grind. I didn't want to announce it until I knew we were there. So I waited till the last month to even tell our leaders. And it came on the first day of the conference. I'm speaking that night, finally got the books. There was a backup because of all, the stuff, everything's on delay because of what's happening with a shortage of workers and all that. It came at 4 p.m., the day of the Monday night. And I was like, oh, thank you, Lord.
Yeah.
So it was biting my nails, man.
I remember we had that little short conversation on that. God's timing.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
The timing of God, yeah.
Wow. So somebody who gets your book and reads it, what are something or some things you want them to get from reading this book? Somebody that's part of our ministry, and then even somebody that's not part of our ministry.
Somebody that's part of our ministry, I want them to know that they're part of a great spiritual heritage. They come from a good line, a good heritage of leaders that have gone before. Some of them are in the book, they're in heaven now, but they were pioneers. This generation can learn a lot from the pioneers of then, because the money wasn't quite there, the sacrifice was bigger. All these different things you're going to see in this book of the price they paid should give you a sense of honor, and that we're building ourselves off the shoulders of others that have gone before us. I was on their shoulders. People are now rising upon my shoulders because I'm like a bridge, me and my generation, and we want to see it continue into the future. So one of the main reasons I wrote it is so that we have, the Bible says, write the vision down, make it plain on tablets, and he who reads it will run. Though it tarries, wait for it, it will surely come. It comes at a point in time. It came on time, but now it's written. So it's not just going to be verbal. Now they could actually read it and have it in their library and pass it on to the next generation until the Lord tarries. So that's and to build faith and, for the future. That's part of what I wrote it for too, for in-house. For outside of us, it also could be used as something of, like I said earlier, God could use unlikely people to do extraordinary things. Somebody like me that, I may have the name, but I didn't think I would ever be a preacher at first, and I didn't think I could ever do it. But in the book, it will tell you how somebody timid and shy could rise up.
Yeah, because even a believer or even a non-believer could read this and still get something out of it. Of course, we want him to lead to the Lord, but during that journey, it can also lead them for their business, for schooling, for their marriage. There's a lot of nuggets in here that you share, very vulnerable, very transparent, a lot of heritage and honor.
Yes.
I'm just privileged, one, that you wrote the book. I'm glad that you followed through with it. Two, I'm enjoying reading it. I know our audience, I'm going to encourage you guys after right now to get the book, but you will not be let down by getting this book. Once you read it, it's going to be hard for you to put it down. Matter of fact, I'm going to hold it on for the rest of the interview because I don't even want to let it go. Even though I'm not reading it right now, it's just one of those books that once you grab it, you don't want to put it down.
It was endorsed by Nicky Cruz. The foreword is written by my father, Sonny Sr. Also, Tim Story, great evangelist. And anyway, by the way, we're working on the Spanish version.
Very nice.
It's almost complete.
Wow.
So we're going to launch that within a month or so, or maybe less.
Anything in the future for like an audio book?
That's another step we want to take. Yeah.
I would love to be able to listen to this while I'm at the gym or on the treadmill and just listening.
I know that's an in thing too.
Yeah.
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 So we're working on that too. So part of the whole package that I made, the deal that we made with our publisher was to do those things. So we want it, and then later it'll come on Amazon down the road. We want to get these hard copies out first, and so if you can, order the book.
Absolutely, and we're going to put a link down below to be able to not only go online to order your book, but to also get more information on Pastor Sonny Jr. Pastor Sonny, is there anything else you want to end, or you want to tell people what you're working on, what you have in the future?
Well, a thing you need to keep in prayer, if you're a Christian out there, I want you to know that we're still expanding as a movement, planting churches, planting bases. So we're planting a church in Boston, which is a big city, a very strategic city. And we're sending a team. In fact, part of the team already left. The rest of the team's going within a few weeks. Me and Kim are going to go over there to check out the facilities tomorrow. And so we'll be there this week. So keep us in prayer. Keep the whole project in prayer. And if you could give toward that too, it's a very expensive city. And our Run for Hope campaign doesn't go toward this project. It's a multi-regional thing that we're doing to plant this church. And it takes a lot of money to do that and a lot of prayer. So if you could help us with that, on our vochino.org, you can find a link for Boston and prayer requests. And also, you could also find a place to give for that. So that would be something that's right now happening. So just keep that in prayer and whatever you can do. But get the book. I think you'll like it. It'll be good for your family to read it. And I think they'll be inspired by it.
Absolutely. Get your copy now. Keep the Boston Project in prayer. Also, if you're able to, like our pastor said, you're able to give, we'll put a link down below so that you can also support that project. Pastor Sonny, it's been an honor and a privilege. I've been looking forward to this, and it just went way above my expectations. I love you with all my heart. You're very dear and special to me, my wife, our kids, and I just thank you for taking the time to be able to be on our podcast on Best Version of Me.
Well, let's all be the best version in life and in Christ first. Thank you for having me, Daniel.
Amen,
Appreciate
Pastor.
it.
God bless you. Thank you.